Welcome back to Call to Community. We are on chapter 29, Differences, which contains two selections, one from a Joan Chittister, who I believe published along with Rowan Williams in a manuscript, and then also from Henry Nouwen, well-known practitioner of communal living. And the focus of this chapter is differences between people. And the thrust of both of these authors is that we should really celebrate difference, that differences are not something to be afraid of, and they're actually what, when we can accept the differences between one another and do not feel like we all need to be the same, that's actually when life reaches its fullness. And particularly Joan Chittister, she talks about sameness becoming a kind of security blanket that wraps us up in the warm feeling of being acceptable to the groups with which we identify and whose approval we seek. But she says it is neither psychologically mature nor spiritually healthy. And this, I think, is really a good insight, because we can easily get trapped in narrow ways of thinking, which have really nothing to do with what the life Jesus wants for us.
Right, and also, as she points out here, we're not contributing much. We're just sticking with familiarity and sameness and gravitating towards that. So really it's hard to have a point of view or to contribute, bring something to everyone else when you're just all accepting of sameness or the illusion of that.
You're not moving the ball forward. And, if you look at Christian history, Christianity really is a religion of disruption. It was disruptive in its first incarnation, in every major iteration or throughout Christian history has been when the faith grew was in moments of disruption. You think of the desert fathers who went out into the deserts because they wanted to seek a pure Christianity, or St. Francis was a very disruptive figure, or obviously the Reformation was an extreme disruption in.
Yeah, I think of the word revolution like every time, first when Christ came to the world, that really rocked society, and I think Chittister puts it well here, that to follow the one who talked to the Samaritan woman and Roman soldiers all the time, allowing them to be who they were, that was Christ's way, and that was really counterculture to the time and unexpected, and to respect and honor each person in spite of differences was an important part of the message.
Yeah, it was really the message, and Jesus often then, of course, rebuked those who wanted to cling to laws and traditions and sameness. And actually, I would just like to recommend, there's an interesting article in the most recent Plough Quarterly. It's the summer issue, Hope and Apocalypse, by the theologian David Bentley Hart. It's called, let me find the title here, it's called Tradition and Disruption. And that's basically the thesis of the article, is that Christianity actually managed to survive for several centuries without any major doctrinal agreement. And basically what sustained it was not conformity in, everything, but expectation of the final revelation of God's truth, which, we can't claim to know. We aren't meant to know. And, this is obviously a bit of a controversial thesis, but I think it rings really true, particularly for us coming from the Anabaptist tradition.
Yeah, and I mean, going along, you mentioned truth, and I think we should talk a little bit about that, because this is where it can start unraveling when you talk about differences. First of all, this quote kind of stuck out to me. The truth the truth is that it is only when we think against the mind of another that we find out what we ourselves really think, what we ourselves are willing to support. And that's so true. I mean, that's been probably everyone's life experience, and it's important to crystallize that, to understand what the moral laws that guide us are, especially in community. That is essential. But then the author here in this excerpt talks a lot about personal truths. So I was wondering if you could speak to that, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one part that makes me a little edgy. She writes, to speak another truth, our own truth, our uniquely defined truth, however finished, however settled, is to confirm the value of our own existence. This, I kind of worry, is where this idea of difference goes off the rails, because it sort of, it gets close to the kind of postmodern moral relativism that we've seen so much of in recent years, where everyone has their own truth and there really is no, guiding moral principle. And I think, we do well to remember Jesus' words, I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, I came to fulfill them. Mm-hmm. And, I'm no theologian or philosopher, but I do think there's a distinction between, laws and observations that were meant for a certain time and place that made sense in a certain epoch, and moral laws, which are immutable. And I think people love to sort of bathe in the warm bath of affirmation of everything, and I don't think that's what affirming differences means. Yeah. I think that's wrong. It's not truthful.
Right. And I think, like anything, if you elevate a concept or an ideal, like cherishing differences above what's actually more important, which is living out Christ's teachings, then it can get pretty warped. Yeah. So that's kind of how I draw the line. I
think the guiding principle in all these things is it should be a refinement of our seeking to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. It shouldn't be a muddying and sort of going with what's socially popular. If anything, differences should drive us to be more countercultural, if you will, or more in the world but not of the world. They shouldn't make us conform more to the mores of the present day.
Yeah, and another point is that it inspires creativity, which is a key component of life and also living in community. You can't just get stuck going through the motions. Like that creative spark of ingenuity is constantly there and also challenging because, as Henry Nouwen puts it, actually once you see the community as sort of a mosaic where everyone's contributing a color, like up close and focused, you don't see the whole picture, but taking a step back, it's actually a beautiful tapestry.
Yeah, and he speaks to the idea that our unique talents are no longer objects of competition, but elements of community, no longer qualities that divide, but gifts that unite. So celebrating differences in this view means that we see whatever talents or abilities we have or whatever deficiencies we have, and the same with others, we see these as complementary, as things that make a beautiful picture and not something that separate us. So we don't need to be jealous of the person who is effective in one area. We are grateful for their gift, and we also accept their lacks, and we do the same for ourselves. So a really good chapter, lots to ponder upon, and I think that's about all.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
See you next week.